Welcome to Reading Africa. Today we're going to read about the SOkoto Caliphate. The SOkoto Caliphate was a sovereign Sunni Muslim caliphate in West Africa that was founded during the jihad of the Fulani War in 1804 by Usman dan Fodio. The major power in the region in the 17th and 18th centuries had been the Bornu Empire. However, revolutions and the rise of new powers decreased the power of Bornu Empire, and by 1759 its rulers had lost control over the oasis town of Bilma and access to the trans-Saharan trade. Vassal cities of the empire gradually became autonomous, and the result by 1780 was a political array of independent states in the region. The fall of the Songhai Empire in 1591 to Morocco also had freed much of central Bilad as Sudan, and a number of Hausa sultanates led by different Hausa aristocracies had grown to fill the void. Three of the most significant to develop were the sultans of Gombe, Kebbi, and Zamfara, all in present-day Nigeria. These kingdoms engaged in regular warfare against each other, especially in conducting slave raids. In order to pay for the constant warfare, they imposed high taxations on their citizens. The region between the Niger River and Lake Chad was largely populated by the Hausa, the Fulani, and other ethnic groups that had immigrated to the area, such as the Tuareg. Much of the Hausa population had settled in the cities throughout the region and become urbanized. The Fulani, in contrast, had largely remained a pastoral community, heading cattle, goats, and sheep, and populating grasslands between the towns throughout the region. With increasing trade, a good number of Fulani settled in towns as well, forming a distinct minority. Developed in the context of multiple independent Hausa kingdoms at its height, the Caliphate linked over 30 different emirates and over 10 million people in the most powerful state in the region and one of the most significant empires in Africa in the 19th century. The Caliphate was a loose confederation of emirates that recognized the Sultan of Amir al-Mu'min, the Sultan of Sokoto. The Caliphate brought decades of economic growth throughout the region. An estimated 1 to 2.5 million non-Muslim slaves were captured during the Fulani War. Slaves provided labor for plantations and were provided an opportunity to become Muslims. Much of the population had converted to Islam in the centuries before. However, local pagan beliefs persisted in many areas, especially in the aristocracy. In the end of the 1700s, an increase in Islamic preaching occurred throughout the Hausa kingdoms. A number of the preachers were linked in a shared tariq of Islamic study. Maliki scholars were invited or traveled to the Hausa lands from the Maghreb and joined the courts of some sultans, such as in Kanu. These scholars preached a return to adherence to Islamic tradition. The most important of these scholars is Muhammad al-Maghil, who brought the Malik jurisprudence to Nigeria. Usman dan Fodio, an Islamic scholar and an Ebonite Fulani, had been actively educating and preaching in the city of Gombe with the approval and support of the Hausa leadership of the city. However, when Funa, a former student of Dan Fodio, became the Sultan of Gombe, he restricted Dan Fodio's activities, eventually forcing him into exile in Gudu. A large number of people left Gombe to join Dan Fodio, who also began to gather new supporters from other regions. Feeling threatened by his former teacher, Hufna declared war on Dan Fodio on February the 21st, 1804. Usman dan Fodio was elected commander of the faithful by his followers, marking the beginning of the Sokoto state. Usman dan Fodio then created a number of flag bearers amongst those following him, creating an early political structure of the empire, declaring a jihad against the Hausa kings Danfodio rallied his primary Fulani warrior scholars against Gombe. Despite early losses at the Battle of Suta and elsewhere, the forces of Danfodio began taking over some key cities starting in 1805. The Fulani used guerrilla warfare to turn the conflict in their favour and gathered support from the civilian population, which had come to resent the despotic rule and taxations of the Hausa kings. Even some non-Muslim Fulani started to support Danfodio. The war lasted from 1804 until 1808 and resulted in thousands of deaths. The forces of Danfodio were able to capture the states of Katsina and Daura, the important kingdom of Kanu in 1807, and finally conquered Gombe in 1809. In the same year, Mohammed Bello, the son of Danfodio, founded the city of Sokoto, which became the capital of the Sokoto state. The jihad had created a new slaving frontier on the basis of rejuvenated Islam. By 1900, the Sokoto state had at least 1 million and perhaps as many as 2.5 million slaves, second only to the United States in size among all modern slave societies. However, there was far less of a distinction between slaves and their masters in the Sokoto Empire. From 1808 until the mid-1830s, the Sokoto Empire expanded gradually, annexing the plains to the west and key parts of Yoruba land. It became one of the largest states in Africa, stretching from modern-day Burkina Faso to Cameroon and including most of northern Nigeria and southern Niger. At its height, the Sokoto state included over 30 different emirates under its political structure. The political structure of the state was organized with the Sultan of Sokoto ruling from the city of Sokoto. The leader of each emirate was appointed by the Sultan as the flag bearer of that city, but was given wide independence and autonomy. Much of the growth of the economy of the state occurred through the establishment of extensive systems of rebates as part of the consolidation policy of Mohammed Bello, the second Sultan. Rebates were established, founding a number of new cities with walled fortresses, schools, markets, and other buildings. These proved crucial in expansion through developing new cities, settling the pastoral Fulani people, and supporting the growth of plantations, which were vital in the economy. The administrative structure of the Sokoto state was largely organized around a number of largely independent emirates, pledging allegiance to the Sultan of Sokoto. The administration was initially built to follow those of Muhammad during his time in Medina, but also the theories of al-Mawadi in the ordinances of government. The Hausa kingdoms prior to Usman Danfodio had been run largely through hereditary succession. The early rulers of Sokoto, Danfodio and Bello abolished systems of hereditary succession, preferring leaders to be appointed by virtue of the Islamic scholarship and moral standing. Emirs were appointed by the Sultan. They travelled yearly to pledge allegiance and deliver taxes in the form of crops, cowrie shells and slaves. When a sultan died or retired from office, an appointment council made up of the emirs would select a replacement. Direct lines of succession were largely not followed, although each sultan claimed direct descent from Danfodio. The major administrative division was between the Sokoto and the Gwandu Emirate. In 1815, Usman Danfodio retired from the administrative business of the state and divided the area taken over during the Fulani War with his brother Abdullah Danfodio, ruling in the west with the Gwandu Emirate and his son Mohammed Bello taking over administration of the Sokoto Sultanate. The emir at Gwandu retained allegiance to the Sokoto Sultanate and spiritual guidance from the Sultan, but the emir managed the separate emirates under his supervision independently from the Sultan. The administrative structure of loose allegiance of the emirates to the Sultan did not always function smoothly. There was a series of revolutions by the Hausa aristocracy in 1816 to 1817 during the reign of Mohammed Bello, but the Sultan ended these by granting the leaders titles to land. There were multiple crises that arose during the 19th century between the Sokoto Sultanate and many of the subservient emirates, notably the Adamawa Emirate and Kano Emirate. A serious revolt occurred in 1836 in the city of Gombe, which was crushed by Mohammed Bello at the Battle of Gawakuke. The Sufi community throughout the region proved crucial in the administration of the state. The Tariqa brotherhoods, most notably the Qaridiyya, to which was successive Sultan of Sokoto, was an adherent, provided a group linking the distinct emirates to the authority of the Sultan. Scholars Burnham and Last claim that this Islamic scholarship community provided an embryonic bureaucracy which linked the cities throughout the Sokoto state. After the establishment of the Caliphate, there were decades of economic growth throughout the region, particularly after a wave of revolts in 1816 to 1817. They had significant trade over the trans-Saharan route. After the Fulani War, all land in the empire was declared Waqf, or owned by the entire community. However, the Sultan allocated land to individuals or families, as could an emir. Such land could be inherited by family members, but could not be sold. Exchange was based largely on slaves, cowries, or gold. Major crops produced included cotton, indigo, collar, shea nuts, grain, rice, tobacco, and onion. Slavery remained a large part of the economy, although its operation had changed with the end of the Atlantic slave trade. Slaves were gained through raiding and via markets, as had operated earlier in West Africa. The founder of the Caliphate allowed slavery only for non-Muslims. Slavery was viewed as a process of bringing such peoples into the Muslim community. Around half of the Caliphate's population was enslaved in the 19th century. The expansion of agricultural plantations under the Caliphate was dependent on slave labor. However, these plantations were established around the rebates, and the land areas of agricultural production took place around the cities within the empire. The institution of slavery was mediated by the lack of a racial barrier among the peoples and by a complex and varying set of relations between owners and slaves, which included the right to accumulate property by working on their own plots, manumission, and the potentials for slaves to convert and become members of the Islamic community. They are historical records of slaves reaching high levels of government and administration in the Sokoto Caliphate government. Its commercial prosperity was also based on Islamic traditions, market integration, internal peace, and an extensive export trade network. Islamic scholarship was a crucial aspect of the Caliphate from its founding. Sultan Usman Danfodio, Sultan Mohammed Bello, Emir Abdullah Danfodio, Sultan Abu Bakr Atiku, and Nana Asmu devoted significant time to chronicling histories, writing poetry, and Islamic studies. European attention had been focusing on a region for colonial expansion for much of the last part of the last 19th century. The French in particular had sent multiple exploratory missions to the area to assess colonial opportunities after 1870. The French explorer Parfait Louis Montiel visited Sokoto in 1891 and noted that the Caliphate was at war with the Emir of Angungu, defeating Angungu the next year. Montiel claimed that Fulani power was tottering because of the war and the accession of the unpopular Caliph Abdeham Dan Abi Bakr. However, following the Berlin Conference, the British had expanded into southern Nigeria, and by 1901 had begun to move into SOkoto Caliphate, while simultaneous German efforts occurred in Cameroon. British General Frederick Lugard used rivalries between many of the emirs in the south and the central Sokoto administration to prevent any defense as he worked towards the capital, while the Germans conquered Adamawa. As the British approached the city of Sokoto, the new Sultan Mohammed Attahiru I, along with Mohammed bin Anabwani, organized a quick defense of the city and fought the advanced British-led forces. The British forces quickly won, sending Attahiru I and thousands of followers on a Mahdist hijrah. The now shattered caliphate was partitioned by Britain and Germany on March 13, 1903, at the Grand Market Square of Sokoto. The last vizier of the caliphate officially conceded to British rule. The British appointed Mohammed Atiru II as the new caliphate. Frederick Lugard abolished the caliphate, but remained the title Sultan as a symbolic position in the newly organized Northern Nigerian Protectorate. This remnant became known as the Sokoto Sultanate Council. In June 1903, the British defeated the remaining forces of Attahiru I and killed him. By 1906, resistance to British rule had ended. It was dissolved when the British conquered the area in 1903 and annexed it into the newly established Northern Nigerian Protectorate. Although it has lost its former political power, the Sokoto Sultanate Council continues to exist, and the Sokoto Sultans are still leading figures in Nigerian society. Even the presidents of Nigeria have sought their support. Due to its impact, the Sokoto Caliphate is also revered by Islamists in modern Nigeria. For example, the jihadist militant group Ansaru has vowed to revive the Sokoto Caliphate in order to restore the lost dignity of Muslims in Black Africa. This is the end of the reading of the Sokoto Caliphate. Thank you for listening.